You're listening to My Favorite Show, where Dr. Richard Kaul and Greg Riccardi discuss the matters that matter most. Join the conversation by calling 800-962-1160. And now, Dr. Kaul and Greg Riccardi of My Favorite Show.
Okay, Greg Riccardi here, My Favorite Show. I'm your co-host with Dr. Richard Kaul. How you doing, Doctor?
I'm doing great. Good evening, folks.
Excellent, excellent. So today we're very excited. We are bringing back by popular demand, Topic Tapas. That's right. And last week was a very successful episode with lots of callers who called in. We're going to extend that today. What do you think?
I think Topic Topics is the way to go. And as I always say, there's no excuse. You can email in your questions, call in your questions, text in your questions.
I'll give them all that info right now. Folks, we have a website associated with our show. It's myfavoriteshow.com. Go there. Every episode is videotaped, and you can see previous episodes on the website. And we'd love to, we'd love to have you call in, text in. We'd like to have your input on the show. If you want to text us, text MFS for My Favorite Show to 313131, and then add your question and your name after it, and we'll get the text, and hopefully we'll get it on the air. Or you can also call 800-962-1160. That's 800-962-1160 here on WPNJ. So I tell you what, Doc, why don't you take over this week, on the Topic Tapas. You can bring up the topics, and we'll have fun. Oh, by the way, I should mention, very excited to let you know that we have David Detoffol.
Thank you guys for having me this evening.
That's Detoffel.
O-L.
E-L or O-L?
Well, we'll make it O-L tonight.
Let's make it O-L. David is a well-known master attorney in New York City, right? You have a firm there?
And I'm happily out on the lam out here in Teaneck, New Jersey, just over the bridge this evening.
Oh, no. I want to bring up Manhattan.
Oh.
Yeah.
Let's stay on Manhattan then.
Yeah, having lived on that island, which actually exists because of a piece of rock that goes down, there was a building that collapsed early this week on the Lower East Side, right? So I lived in the city for many years, and I lived in high-rises.
Famously.
Famously. People would always visit me, and they'd say, aren't you scared the building might collapse? I'm like, no, these are constructed solidly. So when this building came down,
That was Thursday, right?
Correct. So people called me up and said, see?
Well, I have some friends in the neighborhood, and of course the first thing I did was to call, make sure they're okay, because how often does a building blow up from a gas explosion, rocking the block, taking firemen 24 hours, 70 of them or so, I believe, to extinguish the fire out. Can't even find the remains until earlier today.
And people were killed, yeah?
4 now, yep.
So who's ultimately responsible for that?
I think Con Ed will once again come into focus as to why their inspectors were there an hour beforehand. I think the statement from Con Ed has been that they were there to shut down an illegal tap that was being put in by some contractors for in and around a sushi restaurant.
It's funny that you bring up the issue of contractors. One of the first guests we had on the show was a contractor, and they don't have they have an interesting reputation. Let's just say that. So, do you think it was just the fact that it was old construction that over time?
Well, wait, they were there right before inspecting this potentially illegal tap. Is that what that was?
Yeah. Mayor De Blasio and the chief spokesperson of Con Ed have confirmed that Con Ed inspectors were there only an hour beforehand, ordering a shutdown of the work that was going on, and quote unquote. The inspectors put a lock. I'm not quite sure what that is, and I'm licensed also as a professional engineer in the state of New York, but had put a lock to shut down the gas supply. But shortly after that, there was odors of gas in the area because they pepper it or lace it with methane so you can smell and detect its presence. And then there was a big blow up. So did someone go in and try to remove the lock because they weren't getting a gas supply in the building, or was the illegal work so convolutedly put in there that when the inspectors went to turn it off, it just diverted it somewhere they wouldn't expect it to without maybe doing a thorough exam?
Right.
And then that influence into the system cause the gas to go elsewhere. And
well, I was
cause
reading an article
explosion.
earlier this week about where populations are moving to, and there was a piece about New Jersey, and it said the population is shrinking because people are moving out of New Jersey because of the exorbitant taxes. So do you think this building is going to be a bonus for New Jersey, that people are going to say we're moving out of Manhattan?
Oh, they're moving out of Manhattan. You said moving out of New Jersey, moving out of Manhattan because of the taxes.
No. People are moving out of New Jersey.
Oh, right.
Because of the ridiculously high taxes.
Right.
However, when a building blows up in Manhattan, it's got to have some kind of social migration effect, right?
That'd be the great title for a new book, When a Building Blows Up in Manhattan. It could be. I think it began with the Dust Bowls in the plains, having people move off the farms into the big cities. I'm not sure how I've seen the influx of people and the developers putting high-rise after high-rise, that the flow of people into Manhattan, the wash of humanity, the new wash every day in there, is going to subside with this. But on the other hand, the plaintiffs' attorneys, that's my bar, that's where I do my good work for the little people in the courts, might hold the developers more accountable, the general contractors. I think there ought to be a lesson learned from every one of these tragedies.
I'm glad you brought up
plenty that wind up in the papers more and more often now.
Right.
We have mass population, mass transit. I've heard it said, and it's kind of a crazy statement, but that the destiny of mankind is to self-destruct. Why is that?
Really?
Because fast is not fast enough.
Self-destruct. Who told
Well,
you?
no, that's a very good. It's an interesting statement, because I asked this question exactly the other day. What's the purpose of us being here? There really is no purpose.
Or to make things faster and faster. What are we racing towards?
Exactly. I've always said there's no there. There's no there. You know how someday I'll get there. Meaning like in life or whatever. There's no there. It's all it's all
You mean
now.
we're born, we live, we die.
And enjoy it. Enjoy it out on the farms in New Jersey. There's no rush to Manhattan. Everyone's rushing there these days.
So just to get back to that, so basically there were inspectors there 1 hour prior. I mean, it sounds like what's probably more plausible is that someone did mess with it afterwards, but it sounds kind of weird that they were just there and then an hour later I think the place.
The coincidence of events really has one can draw some inferences with it once we learn a few more facts.
But here's the thing: I want to move from buildings in Manhattan to airlines in Austria.
It's topic tapas, of course. So let's do it. Let's do it.
So that story is a pretty disturbing story. I mean, I'm never going to take a plane out of Vienna.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what do we learn from this one though? Should those that are in the captain's seat be evaluated maybe quarterly rather than just?
But he was the co-pilot.
Or the co-pilot. Anyone who has
access
to the throttle levers, whether it's a big bus or a train, maybe they should be psychologically evaluated or reevaluated quarterly rather than just maybe when they're first hired and expect that they're going to retain their constitution throughout the trials and tribulations of an ordinary man's life.
Right.
Well, I believe that in the U.S. they do need to have more than 2 people at all times in the cockpit. Is that
is that
right,
why?
that
That makes sense. I've seen 3 in there. I thought they were just
hanging
there
out
to have a party.
Yeah. Well, no, I believe that. If I'm not wrong, that is the case. But yeah, I mean, if you only got one person in there, I mean, what's the stop? I mean, he could have steered it into.
Well, he did.
No. Well, he had it descend to 100 feet, which made it crash, I guess. But he could have literally, just actually steered it into a building or a, housing complex or,
Right.
But, crazy stuff. What were you saying?
Well, that could be the lesson to learn from this one. Well, back to the fires too. There were the big fires in Chicago back in around the turn of the century, and then there was the sweatshop fires here in Manhattan, and that had the building code changed. Sporadically, the building code has changed in the city of New York, the great city of New York. Other countries and cities follow it as a model, but it really only changes when there's a disaster.
I was just about to say that it takes something of that magnitude for there to be this kind of change, right? People have to see something terrible happen. And,
unfortunately, that's what takes people to arms to make a change.
Well, I mean, sometimes you don't know there's a problem until it happens, right? So, I mean, we could have gone forever without a pilot doing what he did, and right. So, to predict every crazy scenario or unlikely scenario would be? What do you think? You're laughing, smiling, or something?
Oh, well, no, because I think about the dichotomy between, say, a European way in general of handling things, and then the American way. In the American way, you have lots of rules, and people tend to follow the rules and can follow simple rules. In Europe, and a lot of other countries, there's less rules.
More laissez-faire.
More laissez-faire because of, I guess, a longer-standing culture of how you do things and understand and interact in a humanely way, person to person. But who knows, with the pressures maybe of performance and production, those systems might not work as they once had.
But that's a very fascinating point because it goes back to the founding of America. The founding fathers, came over here to escape British tyranny. Right? They wanted to get away from King George and his taxes. So they thought, we're going to create a new country, and we're going to create this land of laws, right?
Yes.
Because all of those founding fathers were lawyers, weren't they?
They were, and
that's the problem.
And visionaries, yeah. And they came up with a purest form of democracy in a country where there was an abundance of resources.
Was it a republic or democracy?
Well, one and the same, truly.
Is that how you look at it?
Really?
Well, wasn't it not to have the officials elected, the three branches of government, so there's a check and a balance, all that? To me, that rings a democracy. But they might have called it a republic, but
it was a democracy. So now when you have the Republicans and the Democrats, these are two separate political parties, right?
There, the names I think are just misnomers or have no real definitional purpose anymore. It's just a polarizing one.
I think they should have three political parties in America. Don't you think?
Why not?
Well, you got the independents, right? You kind of do, no?
Whatever happened to Ross Perot?
Now, you see, look at this chart over here.
I heard that Mitt Romney might run again.
I hope he does.
Yeah, he's got some pull.
He's got a nice haircut.
Yeah, well, he had an impact the last time, but let's see what happens. That's all for the pundits for the next few months.
All right, next topic. What we got? Dr. Kaul is
Vladimir Putin has backed off. He's gone quiet again.
What do you make of that?
Well, I think it's I read an interesting story which explains the psychology of Putin, because people are trying to work out why the guy is such a dictator. And they trace it back to his origins in East Germany when he was working for the KGB and dealing with the Stasi back in the 70s. And an experience that he had back then that set the tone for him and his presidency.
All right, well, that music sound lets us know that it's time to go to break. We'll wrap up that topic on the other side of this break. We'll see you in a minute.
You're listening to My Favorite Show. Join the conversation by calling 800-962-1160. Stay tuned for more of Dr. Kaul and Greg Riccardi. We'll be right back after these messages.
Register now to attend the 2015 New Jersey Technology Council's Venture Conference on March 31st at Metro Top, just a short 5-minute walk from the Metro Park train station. Join new Choose New Jersey CEO Michelle Brown and Gary Vaynerchuk as startups pitch their products and services. Help your business grow. Register today at njtc.org and get 50% off the conference entrance fee by entering discount code RADIO. That's njtc.org. This message sponsored by the New Jersey Tech Council, the New Jersey Broadcasters Association, and this station.
Hi, I'm Dr. Bob Marshall, PhD, host of Healthline. This month, our Delta Boost is on special. In my opinion, this is the most advanced form of vitamin E. It promotes healthy circulation, overall cardiovascular function. Buy 2 bottles, get the third one free. Call 800-370-3447. That's 800-370-3447.
We're back. My name's Greg Riccardi, your host here. My Favorite Show, co-host with Dr. Richard Kaul. We've got a guest on today, David Detoffol. I'd like to remind you to let your input be heard. Give us a call at 800-962-1160 to ask your questions. We're doing Topic Tapas for the second week in a row. And we were just before break, we were talking about, was it Vladimir Putin?
You're talking about, Vladimir Putin. Yeah. So the story about how Putin came to be who he is today is a fascinating story. He was based in East Berlin back in the 70s, or was it the 80s? And he was in charge of the KGB. And as the Berlin Wall was crumbling, he came under attack from all these German demonstrators. So he called Moscow and he said, "Look, you've got to help me out. You've got to send the tanks in." And they said, "We're not doing anything." So he basically was cut off from any support and had to defend the KGB headquarters in Berlin. So that lesson, that kind of set the tone for when he went back to Russia, how he decided to set up his government and his power structure. And that's why it seems so brutal and so extreme, because of that one experience.
I saw Stallone do one like that. I think it was called Rambo. He came back and he put his foot down. He said, "I am not indispensable." Wow, could have been like that. But more seriously, now you feel he's drawing back from his iron fist rule there?
Yeah, I think he's pulling back. Because there was a period of time he was looking to re-establish the Soviet Empire. He was going out and there was a battle going on it was still going on in the eastern Ukraine between the Russian-backed separatists and the democratically elected Ukrainian government. He went into Crimea.
Well, has that been the business model for imperialism for just about ever? You go into a country where there's a lot of resources, rich resources, and then you keep the power that is there imbalanced so that you can keep extracting what you need from the land, and the local constituents can't claim any of it for their own.
That's right, just like the British with their empire.
Yep, that's the largest imperialist power that's existed in our history books, but plenty others still do. They might call it something else these days, but I don't doubt that it goes on in Africa either these days. China's there. They seem to put out that they have legitimate contracts and interests there, but who knows why there's those land or warlords there that just can't seem to put in some kind of rule by any sort of whatever you want to call it, an oligarchy or dictatorship that is just a one that's good for the people. It just doesn't seem to exist.
The Chinese really are an emerging global power. Do you think they're an emerging or emerged?
They are imperialist when it comes to business and enterprise expansion.
No, I think that's a good thing. You see, people talk about other powers coming up and trying to serve their own interests. But I think it's important for global peace that there be more than one entity that sits in the driving seat, or they take turns.
In terms of like a balance of power type thing?
Yeah, correct. You've got to have more than one player who's calling the shots. So when they get all together, the United Nations, you don't have bullying going on.
A free market of power, yeah.
Right.
Let the kindest, most beneficial power.
Everything today that I see that comes into America, actually, that's manufactured, is made in China.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wow, so much is. That said, I think that Putin's still going to be in for a while. There's a lot of the Russians that I speak to here who have immigrated have expressed that sentiment to me.
Yeah.
That he has a strong base there, and the local people really liking him.
Well, he's a judo expert as well.
Is he really?
Yeah.
When he's not riding horseless?
He rides horses,
shirtless
shoots chickens, does judo.
Nice.
Has he shot his vice president?
But actually, you got to...
He hasn't. He still has some time, though.
There was that guy who stood up to him that was shot recently. There was an opposition politician.
Oh, yeah.
Who was shot, and it was because he was coming out very vocally against Putin and talking against the totalitarianism that he saw emerging, around Putin and in that part of the world. So, they took care of it, the way that the ex-Soviets used to.
Yeah, and there was also the young girls band there that they've suppressed too.
Pussy Riot?
Pussy Riot, that's them. Yeah, they can't seem to get on the
That's
on
a
the
great
airways.
name for a band.
Yes, I
I
remind.
wonder who their manager was. It was Simon Cowell. You think he was behind that?
All right. Well, I remind you, this is a family show here. So now, tell us about your background in terms of law. What law do you specialize in?
Well, I started in the academics as an engineer, and that was back in the 80s when we were still a manufacturing entity. This country was, and I kind of saw the writing on the wall for how the things would turn out as they are today, because within the first 5 jobs I had in 5 years, I had to keep starting over as a young engineer. The reason I had 5 jobs in 5 years was because each company was either packing up and sending their work to be done overseas or having to consolidate and relocate. And it appeared to me that I would have to become a journeyman and follow the engineering work wherever it might go to remain purely an engineer. And to me, that was disconcerting. That had me think, well, how can I use engineering, which I truly like, it's part of me, just to be able to take things apart, put them back together, solve problems. And the answer became, well, go to law school and become a patent attorney. So I did that, and now there's an overlap of technology and the law. From that, I went on to start helping little people, too. When I say little people, there's so many lobbies out there.
Dave, I'd like to interrupt you. This issue of patents and the claiming of intellectual property. Okay, you see, there are a number of governments around the world that don't respect U.S. patents. China, India, a couple of other large governments, because it's their belief and their philosophy that knowledge belongs to everybody, and you can't, an individual can't claim access to a particular piece of knowledge and prevent others from benefiting from it, because knowledge belongs to everybody.
Well, let me begin with democracy here in the United States, and it goes back to the founding forefathers. I think we were talking about that in just before the intermission.
Yeah.
There and back then, Ben Franklin being one of the founding and signing to the original Constitution
the
under Article
Declaration.
1, respected, and they all understood that property rights ought to belong to individuals, because that's going to empower them and inspire them and motivate them to create the best and toil and work the hardest to create quality things. And so that includes not just the real estate that you live in as property or the car that you own as an individual, but also your intellectual property, the things that come and are born from your mind, whether it's a copyright, a trademark, or an invention, which gets covered by patents. Those other countries you mentioned do not have the kinds of property rights that individuals can own. China is communist. Okay, no one can really own
But
property.
India's a democracy. It's the largest democracy in the world, and its courts do not agree at all with the philosophy of sectioning out knowledge.
I haven't really studied the property right profile in India. I'm not sure how that goes for tangible property as opposed to intellectual, but if I believe that they are a signatory to the WHO. That's the World Harmonization Organization that tries to unify each country's patent laws so that someday in the future, it's kind of like
Global.
the UN. Yeah, it could be one global set of rules that are enforceable. Unfortunately, when it goes intercontinental or inter-country, it's really only up to treaties between the countries where one will enforce the rights for the other. So,
But you have to admit that some of the patents that are filed by people in the United States, to me, seem a little bit extreme. It's like we're going to file a patent to this word, or we're going to file a patent to this particular pattern of behavior. Would you agree, or do you do? I mean, you must
What do
see
you think?
you must see some crazy patents being filed.
Yeah, well, there's lots and lots and lots of rules for filing a patent application. I like to say it's it's the rocket science. It's the brain surgery of law, because it's intellectual property. You're in there in the brain,
right.
And there are so many rules, and it's kind of amorphous, the concepts, and the courts in the United States have sort of done what they can to get the precedential law that comes out of the courts to be consistent, so that practitioners can stick their finger in the wind and get an idea of how to apply the principles that stand behind these statutes to allow patents to grant that better the economy and people's lives. There's a strong initiative by the Patent Office in the U.S. to undo patents that were issued for business methods. So I think that what comes up a lot as a concern or a headline topic about patents, maybe being the demise of things, come in two varieties. One of them is whether you could patent just about anything, and like a method of doing business,
Right.
or hey, can we patent an organism?
Could I patent my voice?
Maybe someday, not just yet.
I think you're safe. I don't know how many people want to steal your voice there, Doc. But okay.
And the other thing is the
I'm
concept of what is called a patent troll. That's a non-practicing entity. Hey, can someone come up with the cure to cancer and then just not make it and not let anybody use it and that sort of thing, and then just stop others.
But that's the thing.
It's possible. Is that possible?
A cure to cancer? I would only hope.
No, meaning something like that.
Yeah, well, that's what so the premise, the framework to think about it rationally of what a patent is it's the only thing that the U.S. government or any country's government will do to issue a legal monopoly. Monopolies are illegal. We all know that.
Right.
The only legal monopolies,
In a sense, yeah,
are patents. The exchange, the quid pro quo, the this for that, is that if you're going to make publicly known your intellectual property rather than keep it a secret, and you disclose it in your patent,
right,
you get in exchange from a government who issues you a patent the right to exclude others from making, using, or selling it for a period of time. And here in the U.S., it's 20 years from the date you first filed for
I think it's a fascinating area because you're a lawyer and I'm a doctor. So we belong to something that was antiquatedly known as a profession, okay? And, a profession was a group of individuals getting together and saying, we own access to this body of knowledge, right? And nobody else can engage in or use this body of knowledge for any purpose other than us, right? But what's interesting, what's happening now with Obamacare, is, they're bringing in all kinds of healthcare practitioners to provide medical care.
Nothing like opening up a big can of worms right before a break. Here we are, my favorite show, Greg Riccardi here with Dr. Richard Kaul. We're going to go on break, and we'll see you on the other side of it in a minute.
You're listening to My Favorite Show. Join the conversation by calling 800-962-1160. Stay tuned for more of Dr. Kaul and Greg Riccardi. We'll be right back after these messages.
Hi, this is meteorologist Steve Pelletieri from Ion Weather. This February was one of the coldest on record, with some places getting record snowfall for the second year in a row. Into the month of March, we're dealing with frozen Great Lakes, rivers, and local ponds, and there's still lots of snow on the ground. So it's a fair bet that winter conditions will continue into April. If you need verification of minor or major snow, ice, and mixed precipitation storms to charge or pay for snow and ice services, you need Ion Storm Total. It's a professional weather service whereby we email or fax storm reports automatically to you 48 hours after each storm. We currently have 30 research reports from this season detailing the storm totals for this area. The cost of our professional service is very reasonable. You can get this information today for a fee by calling me at Ion Weather. Call 1-800-THUNDER. That's 1-800-848-6337. You need Ion Weather storm totals in order to bill or pay for snow and ice removal services. For storm totals, call 1-800-848-6337. Again, for snowstorm totals for this season, call 1-800-THUNDER.
All right, we're back here with David Detoffol and Dr. Kaul and myself talking about patent law and how Actually, interesting and fascinating it is. We're just on break. We were talking about insurance companies and their role in it. But tell us a little more about that.
Sure. Yeah. Don't anyone be afraid of the law. It's most of it is founded on common sense and good principles. We've been talking about intellectual property and why that's good for a nation and a democracy. But let's talk about insurance companies for a second. You did bring up Obamacare, Dr. Kaul.
Yeah, well, I brought it up in the context of, the monopoly that a group of guys called physicians have tried to maintain for about 300 years in terms of delivering healthcare or medicine. So the Affordable Health Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare, is kind of going against that and saying, listen, we're going to set up a system where healthcare is going to be provided by a variety of healthcare providers, nurse practitioners, physician's assistants, doctors. So there's an expansion of that going on and an erosion of the term profession.
Well, I think, and so many areas of specialty, areas are becoming so densely complex with information and advancements that subspecialties, I think, inevitably are created out of them. I guess that's happening in medicine now too. It's interesting to hear that from you, Doc.
Right,
I don't doubt it for a minute.
I mean, it's my prediction, and we'll see, if it comes true. In about 10 years' time, most healthcare is going to be provided by machines and robots.
Yeah. Well, why? Because things have to be faster and faster.
Right. Humans are going to become unnecessary. It's happening already with robotic surgery. I mean, at the moment you've got some guy who's controlling it from a panel, but even that's going to become automated. So
kind of like a car wash. You just
Yeah, you can't let
go in one side, get the procedure.
You can't. Yeah, computers. that's what's going to be making things faster and faster until you don't know how to even, how they're running themselves. But back to insurance companies for a second.
Yeah.
I want to give them the zing. I have the microphone for the moment.
There you go.
Against the larger voice that the insurance companies have throughout the land. Of course, they have the funds to put the nice suits and good heels on the lobbyists down in Washington to create a presence, an understanding, a zeitgeist throughout the dining rooms in everyone's home, what they might talk about at home after watching the news. That maybe the plaintiffs' bar, the bar, the lawyers that represent little people, to kick open the courthouse doors for widows, indigents, the poor, that somehow we're going to ruin the country. Because
David versus Goliath.
The David versus Goliath. So the insurance companies will of course have the big advertisements on TV. They'll sponsor the Super Bowl, sporting events. You have your Allstates, your State Farms, your Geicos out there. To think of them in a friendly way, as if they're your friend. Until, folks, you go to try to collect.
Right.
Okay? They're in the business of collecting premiums, not paying the claims. So.
That's exactly right. And again, I wrote a rather extensive piece, entitled "Geico and Their Gang of Lawyers," whereby they do exactly this. And the question I've always asked is, how did they become so powerful? They control.
So to the point I'm really driving here too for the listening audience is that. The McDonald's case, the famous hot coffee on the lap, where the jury had enough, and rightly so, had enough, and awarded compensation to the young woman who had her lap and lower torso scalded with screamingly hot coffee. I think it was over 170 degrees or 160 degrees. Mm-hmm. The verdict was for millions of dollars, and people think it just stopped there, and hey, anyone can go to court and retire on an award. Well, not true. Not true at all. Again, as I mentioned earlier, the courts are very fair. There's appellate courts. So what didn't get the front page coverage was that about a year later, the verdict was reduced. It was reduced by the appellate division to something like on the order of about $70,000. That, of course, the insurance company and their lobbyists didn't want to publicize on the front page. So after it wasn't really on anyone's radar, that appellate reduction made it onto page 20 of the paper in a small section in a corner one day. But so often these large verdicts do get reduced. They don't get sensationalized when they're reduced. What only gets sensationalized are the big verdicts. Why?
Right.
Because the lobbyists want every juror sitting in a jury box to think that a claimant is trying to ruin the country and bankrupt insurance companies. Just not the case. In fact, every state every year comes out with more legislation to make it more difficult for victims of any kind, whether it's a personal injury case where they were injured as a result of a poorly designed car, or a building that blew up because Con Ed inspectors or whatever it is, or maybe the general contractors or the landlord was not doing their duty to keep a safe gas system in a place, or whatever the negligence is. It could be an employee harassed by their worker, by their employer in the workplace.
Hold on a second. Let me ask you a question. The insurance industry started in London. Right? Everything goes back to Lloyd's of London. I mean, that's where everything's fed back to. And when you compare Europe to the United States in terms of litigation, there's a lot less civil litigation in Europe than there is in the United States. Right? So this argument of protecting people, on the surface it seems like a good argument, but don't you think the people of Europe are as protected as the people of America in terms of their civil rights and their protections?
Well, I haven't done a study or read one recently in comparative law on how or why, as a societal group, that is the case. I have to imagine it's probably because of the laws and the burdens of proof. Not too many countries have it where there's precedential case law and civil rights. Civil rights go to the heart of a democracy, and why is that? Well, the founding forefathers understood that it's critical to put protections in for the minorities, and that minorities are the flavor that add to a society like salt and pepper to season the earth, and it's important that minority interests are protected. So we have always the Davy and Goliath scenario in a courtroom for someone whose civil rights have been violated up against Tammany Hall, whether it's backed by an insurance company. Folks, we're not even allowed to mention when we're bringing cases and claims for little people that insurance is involved. There's plenty of law that says that if I or anyone in the courtroom were to mention that there's an insurance company that at the end of the day is going to pay the claim, that's a mistrial.
Right.
Really?
But it brings me back to the same point. Okay. I know the problem. The insurance companies are way too powerful. Okay, and
agreed.
Right.
Conceded.
Correct. And you just made the point that they're getting these laws written onto the state books, one by one, whereby they're just fortifying their position. Mm-hmm. So what's the answer?
In the area of what's the answer? The answer is to let the free market rule. That's, I think, that's always the answer. The invisible hand of
Adam
economy.
Smith. Correct, but see, that's a concept that I never quite grasped.
The answer is do not, folks, ever let our country or your state or your locality let a government or legislation do away with the jury process.
Mm-hmm.
The only alternative to that is some administrator somewhere who's going to be deciding your fate, one person, and that could be the person who's always representing the insurance company, and because they go bowling with them and every weekend and that sort of thing, they're not going to be fair after a while and render fair decisions. A jury system is so critical to, while it might not be perfect and it might not be the best system, it's the best one I and our founding forefathers could have thought of.
Are we at any risk of that declining or losing that? Do you see or feel?
There's been erosion on that, and it's claim dependent. So, for instance, in New York and many other states, if a worker is injured on the job as a result of a workplace situation, they cannot sue the employer if the employer has workers' comp insurance. It's remanded into what's called the Workers' Compensation Administration.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a jury trial. There is a workers' compensation administrative judge that decides things, and that's the way it gets decided. So there have been bills suggested and thankfully not passed, where they were going to do that for other categories, medical malpractice type claims, automobile type claims. I mean, it wouldn't stop really once those floodgates are open, but they have in the case of workers' compensation.
So if I were to walk down the street and trip and fall on someone's property or something, I can sue them. But if I'm at work and I trip and fall in my own building that I work at, I can't.
Precisely, Greg.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
But that's why you always want to call a lawyer, just to make sure that in your gut, you haven't overlooked something. And we're always happy to pick up the phone and help and answer your questions.
Are there any circumstances under which that could be, like something intentional or?
Oh, well, you could be at work and still have a case. Like a classic example is, let's say we have a grocery store attendant out on the loading dock, waiting to receive a shipment of produce, and the independent contractor, the trucker, pulls in, who's really not part of the employer or the workforce, accidentally knocks the guy down and breaks his leg. Well, he can sue, that worker can sue the trucker or the trucking company for doing that, even though it happened on the job, on the workplace property. Can't sue the employer, though, for, I don't know, maybe if the worker couldn't get out of the way fast enough because there was grease on the ground because the employer never bothered to hire enough people to keep the area safe in that it was had plenty of traction. Can't sue the employer for that part of the happening of the incident. Or, if it were just a slippery surface in the workplace because the workplace was like that, you can't sue the employer, no. But if there's some outsider that somehow influenced the happening of the incident, then that suit still can exist.
Interesting. So, personal injury is not only, and the patent is not a major part of your business.
It all overlaps.
It does?
So often in life we like to compartmentalize, just because we only have so much energy in the day to think about things. But really, the law is common sense and it overlaps. I can think, Greg, of a case where I had a house painter fall from a ladder and fracture his spine because the ladder broke that he was standing on.
Did he invent something on the way down that made him bleed into a patent case? No, I'm kidding.
A lanyard to stop him from falling. Yeah, no. So I brought a case against the ladder manufacturer. They were represented by an insurance company. They were hiding a lot of the evidence with because a lot of the manufacturing had occurred overseas in China. It was a ladder made in China, sold throughout the United States. And I was able to prove the case. So often, as plaintiff's attorneys, we have to be cunning and find our proof elsewhere. We rarely ever get it from the defendant. So I went into the patents that were filed on this ladder, and I was able to prove the case through what was in the patents to get a very good result for my client.
Interesting. Very good. You wrapped that up pretty good. You heard the music. Excellent. Well, again, we're here, my favorite show, Greg Riccardi, your host with Dr. Richard Kaul. Reminding you to call in with your questions. Number 800-962-1160. Going on break. We'll see you in a few minutes.
You're listening to My Favorite Show. Join the conversation by calling 800-962-1160. Stay tuned for more of Dr. Kaul and Greg Riccardi. We'll be right back after these messages.
We've been documenting history and informing our friends and neighbors for decades, and we're still the first place people turn for news and information. We're reliable when other forms of communication aren't. We're there before, during, and after a crisis to keep New Jersey safe. And we don't hesitate to put ourselves in harm's way to bring critical information to our neighbors. And unlike other media outlets, we're free, local, and available to everyone. But providing a free service to everyone is just the beginning. Who are we? We're New Jersey's broadcasters. Hi, this is Paul Rotella, president of the New Jersey Broadcasters Association, and every day of the year, our member TV and radio stations are there, delivering the breaking news and emergency information you rely upon, providing the music and shows that you love most. New Jersey's broadcasters are a vital part of every community that we serve in the Garden State. Find out more at njba.com and wearebroadcasters.com. So keep listening, New Jersey. We're New Jersey's broadcasters, and we're always on the air when you need us. This message sponsored by the New Jersey Broadcasters Association and this station.
And we're back. My favorite show. I'm Greg Riccardi with Dr. Richard Kaul, co-host with our special guest, David Detoffol. And on the break, we're talking about this law in Indiana that's going on right now? Tell us about it.
Well, I'm not a constitutional law expert.
For me, as an outsider, it's a fascinating case, and I'll tell you why.
Well, let's establish what it is. What's going on?
Well, I'm about to establish what it is.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a battle that's going on between the federal government, right, and the governments of the state of Indiana. Correct?
Indeed.
About who has the right to essentially pass a law and govern the state. So this is one of the things that's always fascinated me about the united, and sometimes not united, states. Who has the ultimate say? And it seems to me as if the Federalists.
There you go.
Had
to be mentioned.
The Federalists, despite the Civil War and everything else that's gone before, are gaining ground inch by inch in the courts of law. That's the seems to me to be the battleground where these things are taking place.
Yes. So it's been said, and there are many commentators that will point to the present administration, federal administration, that's coming from the White House. You have three branches of government: the administrative branch, the legal branch, and then the legislative branch. Right? They're supposed to keep each other in a check and a balance. Remember that, kids from high school?
Yes.
I hope they're still teaching that in high school.
Father Peter, Don Bosco. Go ahead.
It's an important principle.
Uh-huh.
And what seems to be happening is that there's a tension between the federal administration and launching these legislative restrictions on speech and conduct and action that states and state rights are having to stand up to that. Again, little individuals really can't. So it tends to be the attorney generals from states around the country that are giving the federal administration the pushback. There's an ebb and a flow and a pendulum to things. I don't think it's really purely political. I think it goes to the heart of
Social issues?
Social issues.
Yeah.
It really
in
does.
Each state?
In each state.
Mm-hmm.
And as I understand it in a very overarching way of what's happened is that the Indiana state legislature and has put a law out there that would permit a business to refuse to do business with what's otherwise a federally protected class if the business owner feels that the class's beliefs go against the business's core beliefs or interests. I think that's the issue. Now that's a spicy topic. I think that there's no quick, kind of a title or tag to put on that to say it's right or wrong. But I think it's one that certainly invites discussion and debate.
How can a business be religious or straight or gay or have?
No, but that's not the issue.
Well, no, Greg. I think Greg
the issue
has
the right
handle on this.
of the state to dictate what happens within the state in terms of the laws. I mean, that's why. Otherwise, why have state governments?
I wish there were lines as bright and sharp as that. When there's different layers of government, there are different jurisdictions for governments. You can have, we're all in the United States, then you have a state, then you have a county within it, then you might have a local township, and the layers of laws just pile onto each other, and there are vague gray areas between. So the exceptions, I think that Greg was alluding to, have been that religious organizations can practice. Well, they can practice their affairs in a way that are consistent with their core beliefs, and that subordinates, in other words, is superior to having to follow civil law. Then the civil law is, hey, in a workplace or in a place of public accommodation, you have to and can't discriminate. You have to treat and cannot discriminate against protected classes, and that's the classic issues of based on race, religion, national origin, gender. However, the range of protected classes is ever expanding to sexual identification, sexual orientation, and those are those are battle lines that would then spill into even greater areas of concern, whether it's having to fund Social Security payments or pay Social Security from the federal government to domestic partners, and so the money becomes an issue too at the end of the day for who has to pay, whether it's for help me here prophylactic or family planning. Contraception. Thank you. I don't know why that wasn't coming to me. I just conceived. Yes, I conceived the concept of contraception. Thank you. Right. So I think Greg was right to say that it touches on social issues, religious ones, and of course funding and federal government and Social Security taxation and things like that. But what was interesting to me is that Apple chimed in right away and said, "Oh well, we're going to boycott the state of Indiana." Well, look, if boycotts are permissible, why isn't a state, if a state is really a business, a state government is a business in a way?
But now, hold on a second. There has to be a line that has to be drawn somewhere. Okay, so if a state decides,
the state of Apple. The Apple state out of San Jose and San Francisco.
One Apple way.
Let's talk about where they're from.
It's the empire of Apple, the Apple empire.
Who happens to be the greatest filer and recipient of patents in the United States, believe it or not.
Let me ask that question.
It's all connected.
If a state decides that it wants to do an act of law that's against the interests of humanity, shouldn't that be stopped? Shouldn't that be opposed?
Well, how do you define humanity? How do you define humanity?
Go at it, fellas.
Well, in the interests of human beings, right? I mean, isn't that something that should be stood up to? I mean, if a state, if a body, if an entity tries to pass a law that is contrary to the interests of human beings.
Well, it begins there, and I think that's probably the mantra, one of the founding principles to the United Nations. But when you get into the granular detail, after a while, there's pros and cons to a lot of things, and it gets complex. So people could read up on it and want to think about it more, but that's I'm only going there to support my initial concept or point or position on this, which is that I don't think there's a quick answer, to it. And in fact, if people were to read Supreme Court decisions from the United States, they would really appreciate the wisdom of our 9 judges up there over time. They do write decisions that take all of the interests into account and come up with what the information they have at the time is the best solution at hand. And what's disconcerting to me is politics and whether or not the political system here in the U.S. is broken, because politicians will get up there and only speak their rhetoric, their sound bites, to polarize. Politicians
But why
polarize.
is it? Here's the thing that bothers me.
And no one reads. How many people out there will vote
But
just based on
99% of
Roe v.
politicians
Wade,
in America,
one way or the other, without ever having read the decision?
99% of politicians in America are lawyers. How many? I don't know.
And I think 96.5% of all statistics are made up on the spot.
Yeah. Exactly. So you're you mentioned. Oh, did you finish your point before? You were saying.
Wasn't Dean a medical doctor who didn't he run for president there? What?
Oh, Howard Dean.
Howard Dean.
He is a medical doctor. The guy that jumped up and down on the stage.
We have to roll him out again in the next campaign. Ross Perot, the non-lawyers.
Non-lawyers.
So your favorite case to put to bring forth or fight for? What would you say?
Oh, there's been many. I've had cases against.
Or type of case. I mean, or specific.
Well, but my greatest heroes are really the widows, the indigents, the people who can't speak for themselves. I came from I'm essentially first generation. My parents are born in Italy. My dad was. My mom's parents were. And so, having grown up that way, I realized that they and my large extended family were really good people, but just didn't know the culture that well in some cases and couldn't speak the language perfectly. So for me, becoming an attorney, the vulnerability, the greatest pride I have is representing anyone these days who really can't find their own voice and does have a good cause.
Would you do it for free?
Well, I earn my fee. It's interesting you bring that up, Dr. Kaul. I don't charge for my service. I only earn my fee. That's if I'm able to accomplish the mission at the end, will I then get paid as part of from part of the recovery.
Now that's on a personal injury case though.
Or workplace discrimination, or when I've chosen to represent patent holders or copyright holders or trademark holders against larger entities. I've represented recording artists and musical composers against Puffy Combs, that's Puff Daddy, Hilary Duff, when her songs were on the top 10 list. I've had cases against Donald Trump. I even have one now against...
Did you cross-examine him?
The case settled before we had
so
him. One of my other more notables is the one against Michael Jackson when he was still with us, and the Jackson 5. They had a venture that you could read a little bit about that on Google. But they are artists themselves, but the ones that have the greater distribution and funds and they like to tamp down the competition of little people. So going back to what you asked, Greg, I like representing little people. They're my greatest heroes. They inspire me the most.
Well, that is a very inspiring thing to learn about you, and a great way to end the show. What do you think, Doc?
No, I agree. We need more lawyers.
So we need more David Detoffol. Which doesn't sound like an Italian name, I have to say.
It's Northern Italian.
All right.
There's a capital T, D-E capital T.
Do you like broccoli rabe?
Love it.
All right, good. Then now you're Italian.
If I was stuck on a desert island, that was what. If I could only choose one food, it would be that.
Don't tell me that's mine as well. So thanks again, David. And if you want to reach David, you can reach him at 212-962-2220, correct?
That is it.
And
me and my staff will be glad to answer any questions anyone might have.
Very good. Well, thanks again, and thanks for everybody for calling in your questions. And this wraps up another edition of My Favorite Show, and we'll see you next week. Thanks so much.
Thanks, folks.
You've been listening to My Favorite Show, where Dr. Richard Kaul and Greg Riccardi discuss the matters that matter most. My Favorite Show is taped live Monday nights at 7 p.m. To watch the video of this broadcast in the WVNJ studio, visit myfavoriteshow.com.